My name is Lorraine. I'm 54 years old, and the moment I heard those words come out of my son's mouth, something inside me shattered beyond repair. I was standing outside his bedroom door, hand frozen on the doorknob, about to ask if he wanted dinner when I heard him laugh into his phone and say to his girlfriend, "I'm so tired of seeing my mom's face every morning. 22 years of sacrifice, of working 2 jobs, of skipping meals so he could eat, of giving up every dream I ever had." And this was what I meant to him. A burden. An inconvenience. Something he was tired of seeing. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if this story resonates with you or someone you know, please hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to share will show you that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Now, let me take you back to how I got here. The divorce happened 12 years ago, when my son Brandon was only 10 years old. His father Gerald walked out on us for a woman 15 years younger. Someone had met at a conference in Dallas. The child support checks came sporadically at best. Always the bare minimum the court required. And sometimes not at all. I remember standing in the kitchen the day he left, watching Brandon's confused little face as his father packed boxes, promising to visit every other weekend. Those visits lasted about 3 months before Gerald's new life became more important than the old one had left behind. I threw myself into work because that's what you do when you're suddenly the sole provider for a child who didn't ask for any of this. I worked as a dental hygienist during the day, spending 8 hours with my hands in people's mouths, scraping tartar and listening to complaints about flossing. Then I'd rush home, make sure Brandon had done his homework, feed him dinner, and head out to my second job as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm. I worked until midnight most nights, came home exhausted, slept 5 hours, and did it all over again. My dream of opening a small flower shop, something I'd talked about since I was a girl, got packed away in the same box as my wedding album. Some dreams, I told myself, were meant to stay dreams. I gave up everything for Brandon. I drove a beat-up Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on it while I saved every spare dollar for his college fund. I wore the same 3 pairs of jeans for years, rotated through clearance rack shirts from Target, and cut my own hair over the bathroom sink. Meanwhile, Brandon attended private school because the public schools in our district were struggling, and I wanted him to have every opportunity I never did. He played soccer, basketball, and joined the debate team. I sat in those bleachers at every game, even when I was so tired my bones ached. I skipped meals regularly, telling myself I wasn't that hungry, making sure there was always enough protein and vegetables on his plate for a growing boy. I never went on a single date, never even considered it, because every ounce of my energy went into being the mother I thought he needed. Then came the phone call I overheard last Thursday evening. I'd just gotten home from my shift at the dental office, still wearing my scrubs, my feet screaming from standing all day. I heard Brandon's voice coming from his room, animated and laughing. I smiled, thinking it was nice to hear him happy, and I walked toward his door planning to ask what he wanted for dinner. That's when I heard him say it. "I'm so tired of seeing my mom's face every morning. She's always hovering, asking about my day, trying to feed me like I'm still a kid. It's suffocating living here. But honestly, why would I move out when everything's free?" My hand froze on the doorknob. My heart stopped beating for what felt like a full minute. I heard his girlfriend Amber's voice through the speaker, that high-pitched laugh of hers that always grated on my nerves, saying, "Your mom's such a pushover. She'll never kick you out. My mom would have charged me rent by now." Brandon laughed again. That easy, careless laugh I used to love hearing. "Exactly. She lives for taking care of me. Honestly, it's kind of pathetic how much she needs to be needed." I stood there outside his door, hand pressed against my mouth to keep from making a sound, tears streaming down my face. My legs went weak and I had to lean against the hallway wall to keep from collapsing. I don't remember walking to my bedroom. I just remember suddenly being there, staring at myself in the mirror mounted above my dresser. When had I become invisible? When had I stopped being a person and become just a function, just a thing that provided services? The woman staring back at me looked exhausted, defeated, older than 54. My hair was going gray and I hadn't bothered to color it in months. My scrubs hung loose because I'd lost weight from stress and skipping too many meals. I looked at the photo on my dresser, the one of my mother who died when I was 30. She'd warned me once, about 6 months before the cancer took her. sitting in her hospital bed holding my hand. "Lorraine," Shed said, her voice weak but firm. "Don't lose yourself in motherhood. A child needs a mother who is a whole person, not a martyr." Id brushed it off then, thought she was just tired and medicated. Now, standing in my bedroom with my son's cruel words echoing in my head, I finally understood what she meant. I barely slept that night, staring at the ceiling and replaying every sacrifice I'd made, questioning every choice. When dawn finally broke, I made a decision to try talking to him. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe Id heard wrong. Maybe if we just communicated better, everything would be okay. I dragged myself out of bed, splashed cold water on my face, and went downstairs to make his favorite breakfast. Blueberry pancakes from scratch with crispy bacon, the way Head loved since he was 7 years old. I set the table carefully, poured fresh orange juice, even put out the real maple syrup instead of the cheap stuff. Brandon came downstairs at 8:30, hair messy, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that probably cost $80. He didn't look at me, just slumped into his chair and pulled out his phone, immediately scrolling through whatever social media feed consumed his attention. I put the plate in front of him. Pancakes arranged just right, bacon perfectly crisp. "Good morning, honey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He grunted something that might have been a greeting, might have been nothing at all, his eyes never leaving his phone screen. I sat down across from him, my own plate untouched, hands wrapped around a coffee mug for something to hold on to. "Brandon, we need to discuss something important," he sighed. This exaggerated, put-upon sound, like I'd asked him to donate a kidney. "Mom, not now. I have to get to work." He took 3 bites of pancake, left the bacon untouched, and stood up. The plate stayed on the table, syrup pooling and getting sticky, and he walked out without clearing it, without a thank you, without even looking at me. I heard his car start in the driveway, that brand new BMW he somehow afforded on his entry-level marketing salary, and then he was gone. His phone buzzed on the table. Head left it behind. The screen lit up with a text from Amber. "Did the maid make you breakfast?" I stared at that screen, at the casual cruelty of it, and something cold settled in my chest. After cleaning up the kitchen, wiping down counters, and loading the dishwasher Head never once offered to empty, I sat down with my laptop to pay bills. It was the 1st of the month. Time to tackle the credit card statement. I logged into the account, expecting the usual charges for groceries and gas, maybe my bi-monthly haircut at the budget salon. What I saw instead made my stomach drop. $8,347. The minimum payment alone was $300. I scrolled through the charges with shaking hands. Dinner at the Capitol Grill, $238. Nordstrom, $612. GameStop, $899 for some gaming computer component. Hotels.com, 4 nights at a boutique hotel in Austin I'd never heard of. The list went on and on, charge after charge, all from the card I'd given Brandon 3 years ago with explicit instructions that it was for emergencies only. Car trouble, medical needs, true emergencies, not steakhouse dinners and weekend getaways and designer clothes. I checked the previous 2 months, the same pattern, thousands of dollars each month. And I'd been so overwhelmed with work and exhaustion that I hadn't noticed the creeping balance. I was still sitting there, laptop open, feeling like I might throw up, when my sister Patricia arrived. She let herself in through the back door like she always did, calling out a cheerful hello that died in her throat when she saw my face. Patricia is 4 years older than me, a surgical nurse with 3 grown kids of her own, and she's never been one to mince words. "What happened?" she demanded, setting down the grocery bags Shed brought. Probably more food for me to cook for Brandon. I couldn't speak. I just turned the laptop toward her and watched her face change as she scrolled through the charges. The sympathy disappeared, replaced by a hardness I'd seen her use in the emergency room when dealing with difficult patients. "How long has this been going on?" Her voice was sharp. I found my voice, barely above a whisper. "I don't know. Months, I think." I gave him the card for emergencies, and I just assumed he was being responsible. Patricia slammed the laptop shut, making me jump. "Responsible? Lorraine, look at this house." She gestured around the kitchen at Brandon's coffee mug on the counter, his jacket thrown over a chair, the stack of his mail ID sorted that morning. He lives like a teenager. Hez 24 years old with a college degree you paid for. And Hez bleeding you dry. She launched into a story I'd heard before but never really listened to. Her son, my nephew Marcus, had moved back home after college, and within 6 months, Patricia and her husband Tom had given him an ultimatum: contribute or leave. Marcus had been furious, called them heartless, but had moved out, and now, at 26, he was a successful accountant with his own apartment and a savings account. He still thanks me for pushing him out, Patricia said. He needed to struggle a little, to learn what things actually cost. You're not helping Brandon by doing everything for him. You're crippling him. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but I was so tired. Patricia looked around the kitchen again, and her expression shifted to something like disgust. Does he ever clean? Ever cook? Ever contribute anything besides dirty laundry and attitude? Before I could answer, we both heard the front door open. Brandon's voice called out, "Mom, where are you?" And then Amber's voice. That grating pitch, "Brandon, baby, I'm starving." They walked into the kitchen together, and I saw them through Patricia's eyes. Amber wearing designer yoga pants that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, carrying a purse I recognized from a window display at the mall. $300 price tag minimum. She walked straight to the refrigerator without greeting either of us, opened it, and started rummaging through the contents like she owned the place. Brandon finally noticed Patricia and gave her a lazy wave. "Hey, Aunt Pat." Amber emerged from the fridge with leftover Chinese takeout I'd saved for my lunch tomorrow. "Brandon, your mom didn't do your laundry yet? I wanted to wear that shirt of yours." Patricia's face went red. I'd seen that look before, usually right before she tore into a doctor who'd made a mistake on a patient's chart. "Excuse me, who are you?" Amber looked up, takeout container in hand, like she was noticing Patricia for the first time. "I'm Brandon's girlfriend. I basically live here." She said it casually, carelessly, like it was obvious and unimportant. Patricia turned to me. "She lives here? Since when?" I felt heat creep up my neck. I'd known Amber was here frequently, but I hadn't realized it had become this constant. I didn't know it was official. Brandon shrugged. "It's not a big deal. She stays over most nights." Patricia's voice could have cut glass. "So let me understand this. Your son lives here rent-free, runs up thousands on your credit card, and his girlfriend, who you barely know, has moved in without asking and also contributes nothing." The silence in the kitchen was suffocating. My birthday was coming up in 2 weeks, October 15th, the day ID turned 55. I hadn't celebrated my birthday properly in years. Usually Brandon would grab a card from the drugstore and I'd make my own cake because I didn't want to make anyone go to any trouble. But this year, maybe because I was feeling desperate to reconnect, to prove to myself that we were still a family that loved each other, I decided to host a proper birthday dinner. I called Patricia and asked if she and Tom and Marcus could come over. I spent all of Saturday cleaning the house from top to bottom, scrubbing bathrooms Brandon had made filthy, organizing the living room he treated like his personal dumping ground. I went to the grocery store and bought a nice roast chicken, the expensive one that was already seasoned, and all the fixings for a real meal. Roasted potatoes, green beans, a salad with actual good lettuce instead of the iceberg I usually bought. I even splurged on a bottle of decent wine. I bought myself a new dress for the occasion, the first new clothing I'd purchased in 3 years that wasn't from a thrift store. It was nothing fancy, just a simple navy blue dress from Kohl's on clearance, but it made me feel almost pretty when I looked in the mirror. I did my makeup carefully, something I rarely bothered with anymore, and even styled my hair instead of just pulling it back in my usual ponytail. When I looked at myself that evening, ready for my family to arrive, I felt a flutter of something I hadn't felt in months. Hope, maybe, or just the desperate wish that tonight would remind Brandon why family mattered. Patricia and her family arrived at 6 on the dot, punctual as always. Tom carried a bottle of wine and a card. Marcus had a small wrapped gift, and Patricia hugged me tight and whispered, "You look beautiful." We sat in the living room making small talk, and I kept glancing at the door, checking my phone. Brandon had promised He'd be there. He'd looked me in the eye 3 days ago and said, "Wouldn't miss it, Mom." 6:15 came and went. 6:30. I suggested we wait a bit longer before eating. The chicken was staying warm in the oven. Patricia's expression grew increasingly pinched. At 7:30, when I was running out of excuses and Tom was clearly hungry, the front door banged open. Brandon and Amber tumbled in, laughing loudly about something. Both of them flushed and unsteady. They'd been drinking, that much was obvious. Brandon's shirt was wrinkled, and Amber's lipstick was smeared. They'd clearly been at some kind of afternoon party or bar, somewhere more important than his mother's birthday. "Oh hey. Everyone's here already," Brandon said, like he wasn't 90 minutes late. No apology, no acknowledgement that Head kept everyone waiting. Amber giggled and leaned against him. "Oh my God, is today your birthday?" "Brandon, you didn't tell me," she said it accusingly, like it was his fault she didn't know, like it was unreasonable for me to expect them to remember. I forced a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "It's fine. You're here now, let's eat. I made your favorite." We moved to the dining room, and I served the meal. Chicken that had been sitting warm for too long and was starting to dry out. Potatoes that weren't as crispy as they should have been. Brandon picked at his food, scrolling his phone under the table. Amber pushed the green beans around her plate and whispered something to Brandon that made him snicker. Marcus, bless him, tried to make conversation. He asked Brandon about his job, how the marketing work was going, if he was enjoying it. Brandon's response was defensive and short. "It's fine. Just paying my dues. You know how it is." Marcus, who had worked his way up from intern to full accountant in 3 years, nodded diplomatically. Then he said, probably trying to be encouraging, "Have you thought about maybe getting your own place soon? Building some independence?" The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Brandon's face hardened and I saw anger flash in his eyes. "Why would I do that? Living here is easy and convenient." He said it challenging, daring Marcus to push back. But what came out of his mouth next was worse. He turned to look at me, really look at me for the first time that evening. "Mom doesn't mind, do you? It's not like you have anything else going on in your life. What else would you do with your time if you weren't taking care of me?" Patricia dropped her fork. The clatter on the plate was loud in the sudden silence. Tom's face went dark red, the way it did when he was trying to control his temper. Marcus stared at his cousin with open disbelief. I felt like I'd been slapped. Amber, oblivious or cruel or both, giggled again. "Brandon says his mom needs him here anyway, that she'd be lonely and pathetic without him to take care of." The word pathetic hung in the air like smoke. That was the word Brandon had used on the phone. The word that had been echoing in my head for days. Now his girlfriend was saying it out loud at my birthday dinner, and he wasn't correcting her. I stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor, and mumbled something about getting the cake. I'd made it myself that morning, chocolate with vanilla frosting, decorated as well as I could manage. I brought it out with candles already lit, and Patricia and Tom and Marcus sang happy birthday in voices that sounded strained and uncomfortable. Brandon didn't sing. He sat there scrolling his phone while his family sang to his mother. When they finished, Amber leaned over and whispered to him, just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Is this depressing or what?" Brandon laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Welcome to my life." Patricia's hand slammed down on the table hard enough to make the dishes jump. "That is enough." Her voice had that nurse authority that made even grown men listen. "Brandon, you will not disrespect your mother in her own home, on her birthday." Brandon rolled his eyes, actually rolled his eyes at his aunt. "Oh, come on, Aunt Pat. Mom knows him joking around. She knows I don't mean anything by it." He looked at me, expectant, waiting for me to smooth it over the way I always did, to make it okay, to excuse his behavior and laugh it off. For the first time in 24 years, I didn't. "I don't think you're joking anymore, Brandon." My voice came out steadier than I felt. His face changed, surprise flickering across it. "Here we go with the drama. Mom, seriously, lighten up." He stood, pulling Amber up with him. "We've got plans anyway. Thanks for dinner or whatever." They left, the front door slamming behind them, and I stood there holding a cake with 55 candles melting wax onto the frosting. The aftermath was worse than the event itself. I broke down completely, sinking into a chair and crying in a way I hadn't cried since my mother died. Patricia sat next to me and rubbed my back while Tom cleared dishes, his jaw clenched tight. Marcus, my sweet nephew who'd always been the peacemaker, crouched down next to my chair. "Aunt Lorraine, I love Brandon. I grew up with him. But he's using you. This isn't okay. None of this is okay. Tom came back into the dining room, dish towel still in his hands. That's not a man. That's a parasite. I'm sorry to say it about your son, Lorraine, but someone needs to. Patricia's voice was fierce. You deserve so much better than this. You've given that boy everything, and he treats you like you're nothing. They stayed for another hour, helping clean up, making sure I was okay. But the whole time I kept thinking about what Patricia asked me as they were leaving. Because you can't keep living like this. I spent 3 days thinking about that question. Working my shifts. Coming home to a house that felt less like a home and more like a hotel where I was the unpaid staff. On the 4th day, a Tuesday evening, I wrote out talking points on a notepad. Rent, chores, respect. Basic expectations that any adult roommate would have. I practiced in my head what I'd say, how I'd stay calm and firm but loving. When Brandon came home from work at 9 that night, clearly having stopped somewhere for happy hour first based on the beer smell, I asked him to sit down. Can this wait? I had a long day. He was already moving toward the stairs. No, it can't wait. Something in my voice must have registered because he stopped, sighed heavily like I was asking him to move mountains, and slouched into a kitchen chair. I sat across from him, my notepad in front of me, though my hands were shaking too much to read it. Brandon, we need to talk about our living arrangement. His face immediately closed off, defensive walls going up. What about it? I pushed forward, trying to remember my practiced words. You're 24 years old, you have a good job, and you're making a decent salary. It's time for you to start contributing to the household expenses. I think a fair rent would be $600 a month. Plus you'd need to buy your own groceries and help with chores. $600 was nothing. Barely a third of what a room would cost him anywhere else. But I wanted to start somewhere reasonable. Brandon stared at me like I'd suggested he donate a kidney. Then he laughed, sharp and disbelieving. Are you serious right now? You want to charge me rent? I tried to stay calm, to explain. It's not about the money. It's about you learning responsibility and contributing to the home you live in. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and his expression shifted into something calculating and cold. This is my house too, Mom. I grew up here. I have just as much right to be here as you do. My heart was pounding, but I made myself say it. Actually, Brandon, the house is in my name only. It's my house. Your father signed away his interest in the divorce. I saw the moment that registered, saw his eyes narrow. What came next felt rehearsed, like he'd been waiting for this fight. Wow, so that's how it's going to be? You're going to charge your own son rent after everything. He started listing my failures as a mother. Things I'd forgotten, or never knew, Head resented. Remember when you missed my championship soccer game because you had to work? I was 11, and I scored the winning goal, and you weren't there. Or what about 8th grade, when I had to wear secondhand clothes because you were too cheap to buy me new ones? Kids made fun of me, Mom. They called me Goodwill Brandon. Each accusation was like a knife. Yes, I'd missed that game because I'd had to work a double shift to pay for the soccer league fees. Yes, Head worn some secondhand clothes because I was trying to save for his college fund while keeping us fed. Every choice I'd made had been impossible, picking between bad options, trying to give him the best life I could on poverty wages. But he was reframing every sacrifice as a failure, as proof that I owed him. I stayed here after college to keep you company, Mom. Because Dad left, and you were alone, and pathetic, and I felt sorry for you. That word again. Pathetic. I opened my mouth to respond, but Amber's voice cut through from the stairs. This is really toxic, Brandon. I hadn't known she was in the house. She must have come in through the garage while I was at work. She walked down the stairs in what appeared to be Brandon's t-shirt and nothing else. Completely comfortable. Completely at home in my house. Do you realize what you're doing? She directed this at me, her voice full of righteous indignation. Charging rent suddenly without warning? That's financial manipulation. That's abuse. I felt my jaw literally drop open. Excuse me. Amber sat down next to Brandon, taking his hand in a show of solidarity. My parents would never treat me this way. Families are supposed to support each other unconditionally. What you're doing is toxic and manipulative and honestly kind of cruel. Brandon nodded along, encouraged. See, Mom? Even Amber thinks this is messed up. I tried one more time, keeping my voice level even though I wanted to scream. I'm not trying to hurt you, Brandon. I'm trying to help you grow up. You need to learn responsibility and how to manage money and contribute to a household. These are basic adult skills. Brandon stood up, using his height to tower over me where I sat. You're not going to kick me out, Mom. Where would I even go? You'd ruin my life, and for what? Because you're bitter and alone and you want company. Amber chimed in again. His dad would take him in. You know, and then everyone would know what kind of mother you really are, how you threw out your own son. The threat was clear. If I pushed this, Brandon would go to Gerald, would tell some twisted version where I was the villain, and Gerald would believe it because it would confirm everything Head already decided about me when he left. I felt the fight draining out of me like water through cupped hands. All my old fears rose up to choke me. Abandonment, judgment, being seen as a failure, being alone. Brandon saw me weakening, and he moved in for the kill with the precision of someone who'd learned exactly where my vulnerabilities were. Look, I'll try to help out more around the house, okay? I'll do my own laundry and clean up after myself. Just stop being so dramatic about everything. You're always making problems where there aren't any. He leaned down and kissed the top of my head, patronizing and dismissive. Love you, Mom. I'm going to bed. They went upstairs together, and I heard their footsteps overhead, heard their voices, and then laughter that made my skin crawl. I sat alone at the kitchen table where I'd tried to set a boundary and been completely demolished. But something had shifted. Something small but vital. Under the fear and guilt, there was anger beginning to burn. I'd been manipulated by my own son, gaslit by a 22-year-old girl I barely knew, in my own house that I'd worked myself to the bone to pay for. I sat there until midnight, and with each hour that passed, that small flame of anger grew hotter. 2 weeks crawled by in a tense standoff. Brandon made a show of putting his dishes in the sink, though he never actually washed them. Amber was there constantly now, using my shower, eating my food, leaving her expensive makeup scattered across the bathroom counter. I went to work, came home, made dinner that often went uneaten, and tried to figure out what to do next. Then the phone call came that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work, and my cell rang with a number I recognized as the bank. Miss Brennan? This is Jennifer from First National Bank. I'm calling about your mortgage payment. It was returned for insufficient funds. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. I have automatic payments set up. There should be more than enough in that account. There was sympathetic clicking of computer keys on the other end. I'm showing your account balance is currently at $37. Your mortgage payment of $1,800 was returned yesterday. I told her I'd call back, ended the call with shaking hands, and immediately logged into my bank account on my phone. She was right, $37.16. I scrolled through the recent transactions with growing horror. Venmo transfers to Brandon's account. Cash App payments, ATM withdrawals, $300 and $400 at a time, all from an ATM near Brandon's workplace. A $5,000 payment to Prestige Motors. My vision went blurry at the edges. Over $12,000 drained systematically from my account over the past 3 weeks. I didn't change out of my scrubs. I didn't call the dental office to tell them I wouldn't be in. I got in my car and drove directly to the office building where Brandon worked, a sleek glass structure in the business district that I'd never visited before. The receptionist tried to stop me as I pushed past her desk. Mom, you can't just go back there without an appointment. I ignored her, following the signs to the marketing department, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I found him at his desk, feet up, laughing at something on his computer screen with 2 coworkers standing nearby. His face went white when he saw me. The entire office seemed to go quiet. Sensing drama, I didn't care who was watching. I held up my phone with the bank app open. Did you take $12,000 from my account? My voice was shaking but loud, echoing in the open office space. Brandon's eyes went wide, then darted around to see who was listening. Everyone was listening. He stood quickly, trying to take my arm and guide me away. Mom, not here. Let's talk outside. I yanked my arm away. No. Answer me right now. Did you steal $12,000 from my bank account? A woman at a nearby desk gasped. Another coworker's mouth fell open. Brandon's face went red, then pale, cycling through emotions as he calculated. You said I could use it for the car. We talked about this. The lie came out smooth. Practiced. I never said that. I didn't even know you were buying a car. My voice cracked on the last word. Brandon's expression shifted to something that chilled me. Mom, you must have forgotten. You've been really forgetful lately. He was gaslighting me in front of his entire office. I haven't forgotten anything. You stole from me. His manager, a woman in her 40s with a concerned expression, approached us. Is everything all right here? Brandon turned to her, and I watched in real time as he constructed a lie. I'm so sorry about this disruption. My mom has been having some memory issues lately. Early onset dementia. I've been trying to help her manage her finances, but she gets confused and agitated. The manager's expression immediately shifted to pity. Pity for him. Several coworkers nodded sympathetically, looking at me like I was a confused old woman having an episode. I don't have dementia, Hes lying. But I could see it in their faces. They believed him. Had been setting this up, telling them stories, building a narrative where he was the dutiful son caring for his declining mother. That's why he lived with me, according to his coworkers. Not because he was using me, but because I needed a caretaker. The manager gently suggested. Maybe you should take your mother home, Brandon. Take the rest of the day if you need to. I felt like I was in a nightmare. Brandon thanked her, took my arm again with a firm grip that looked caring to observers but hurt, and steered me toward the elevator. Once the doors closed and we were alone, his mask dropped completely. What the hell was that? You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I was shaking with rage and shock. You stole $12,000 from me. My mortgage payment bounced. Do you understand that? I've never missed a mortgage payment in 22 years, and now the bank thinks I'm financially irresponsible because you drained my account. We got to the parking garage, and I followed him to where his car was parked. There it was, gleaming black and beautiful. A BMW 3 Series that probably cost $40,000. How could you? I whispered. Brandon leaned against his new car, arms crossed. I needed reliable transportation. You always said you wanted me to succeed, to look professional. This car is an investment in my career. Each word was calculated, using my own maternal instincts against me. You invested in your career with money you stole from me. Money I needed to keep a roof over both our heads. He pushed off from the car. Borrowed. Mom, I was going to tell you eventually, and it's not like you were using it for anything. His phone rang, the sound loud in the concrete garage. He glanced at it, and I saw Amber's name, but he fumbled and accidentally hit speaker. Did the bank lady call your mom yet? Amber's voice filled the space between us. Brandon's face went pale. Babe, I'll call you back. But Amber kept talking, oblivious. I can't believe she hasn't noticed until now. She really is as clueless as you said. Then laughter. Both of them laughing about how easy it'd been to rob. Brandon hung up fast, but the damage was done. They'd planned this. Together, they'd planned to drain my account, had joked about it, had congratulated themselves on getting away with it. I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. This wasn't the little boy I'd rocked to sleep, or the teenager I'd cheered for at soccer games. This was a stranger wearing my son's face, a stranger who saw me as nothing more than an ATM machine with the convenient bonus of doing his laundry. Come home tonight, I said quietly. We need to talk. Brandon sighed, annoyed. I have plans with Amber. Something in my voice must have registered because he actually looked at me, really looked at me. Cancel them. Be home by 6. Then I turned and walked to my car, leaving him standing there next to the BMW my money had purchased. And for the first time in months, I wasn't crying. I was planning. I called the dental office from my car and told them I had a family emergency, which was technically true. Then I drove home and spent the afternoon doing something I should have done months ago. I went through Brandon's room. I wasn't proud of invading his privacy, but had given up that right when had stolen $12,000 from me. In his desk drawer, I found bank statements for accounts I didn't know he had. Thousands of dollars in savings. Money had been socking away while claiming he couldn't afford rent. I found receipts for restaurants and bars, weekend trips to Vegas and Miami, all while telling me he was struggling financially. In his trash can, I found crumpled papers, drafts of what looked like a loan application. My name was on it. Had been trying to take out a home equity line of credit against my house, forging my signature for the second time. When Brandon arrived home that evening, Amber was with him despite my explicit request that she not be there. I'd set up my laptop at the kitchen table with all my evidence laid out: bank statements, credit card bills, the forged loan application, printed copies of text messages I'd gotten from the phone company, showing their coordination. "Sit down. Both of you." Brandon started to protest, but something in my face stopped him. They sat. I spent today educating myself about my situation. I spoke to the bank fraud department, and I spoke to a lawyer. That got his attention. His eyes went to the papers spread across the table. I walked them through what I'd discovered. The systematic theft had been going on for months, not weeks. Amber had been encouraging it, coaching him on how much he could take without me noticing. I showed them the text messages I'd subpoenaed from the phone company. "Your mom is so trusting. You can totally take more." From Amber in August. "Shell never check the accounts. She's too busy." From Brandon in September. Plans for their future. All funded by my money. They wanted to get engaged, wanted to buy their own house, wanted to stop wasting time with the old lady. That's how Amber referred to me in texts. The old lady. I was 54. Brandon's response was to justify. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Amber's parents are wealthy. They live in this huge house in the suburbs, and her dad judges me constantly for living at home. I was trying to prove myself, to show them I'm successful. So my financial destruction was about impressing his girlfriend's parents." Amber jumped in, defensive and entitled. "My dad thinks Brandon is a loser for living with his mom at 24. We were trying to fix that so we could move forward with our relationship." I looked at her, this 22-year-old girl who'd inserted herself into my life and helped destroy it. "So your solution was to steal from me?" Amber shrugged. "It's not really stealing. You're his mom. Parents are supposed to help their kids." Brandon added. "It's not like I was going to leave you with nothing, Mom. I was planning to pay you back eventually." Eventually. That word hung between us like a bad smell. I pulled out another paper. "I also discovered something interesting when I had a lawyer look into the property records. You tried to add your name to the deed on this house last year. You forged my signature on quitclaim paperwork." His face told me everything I needed to know. "Who helped you with that? Was it Amber's father?" Brandon's silence was confirmation. He said it made sense for estate planning, that the house should be in both our names since I was living here. Amber finally showed some awareness that this might be bad. That's a normal thing for families to do. Transfer property between generations. I felt exhausted suddenly, bone-tired in a way that had nothing to do with missed sleep. Not while the parent is still alive and living in the house. It's not. What you did is called fraud. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. None of us were expecting anyone. I got up to answer it and found Amber standing there. Even though she was sitting right here at my kitchen table, except the girl at my door wasn't Amber. She was someone who looked very similar. "Is Amber here?" The girl looked concerned. "I'm her roommate, Chelsea. She hasn't been home in 3 weeks, and her parents are looking for her." It took me a moment to process. 3 weeks. Amber had been living in my house full-time for 3 weeks, not just staying over occasionally. I'd been supporting her completely without even knowing it. "She's inside," I said, and stepped aside. When Chelsea came into the kitchen, Amber's face went white. "What are you doing here?" Chelsea looked between all of us, confused. "Your parents filed a missing person report. Amber, they can't reach you, and you haven't been paying rent." "To me," Chelsea said. "She owes me $2,000 in rent and utilities." So Amber had a place, had responsibilities, and had abandoned all of it to freeload off me completely. After Chelsea left with a promise from Amber to come get her things, I returned to the table. "How much of this was her idea?" I asked Brandon. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Amber found her voice, defensive and sharp. "Look, lady, Brandon deserves this house eventually anyway. You're just bitter because you're alone, and you have nothing else in your life. At least Brandon has me." "What do you have?" The cruelty of it took my breath away. Brandon didn't defend me. He just sat there, not contradicting her, not telling her she was wrong. I looked at my son, and finally saw him clearly. Not the child I'd raised, not the son I'd imagined, but the man had actually become entitled, selfish, cruel, weak enough to let his girlfriend attack his mother without saying a word. Amber continued her attack, emboldened by Brandon's silence. We've been patient, but we're trying to start our lives together. You need to step aside and let us move forward. Step aside. From my own house, from my own life. So they could take over both. That night, alone in my room while Brandon and Amber laughed together downstairs, I did something I hadn't done in 12 years. I called Gerald. My ex-husband answered on the third ring, his voice suspicious when he heard mine. Lorraine? What's wrong? I explained the situation, hoping that maybe, despite everything, he'd care about what his son had become. Hoping he'd help me talk sense into Brandon, or at least acknowledge that this behavior was wrong. Gerald listened in silence while I told him about the stolen money, the forged documents, the lies. When I finished, there was a long pause. Brandon's a grown man. Lorraine, this is between you two. I felt something inside me crack. Hez your son. Doesn't it matter to you that Hez stealing and lying? Gerald sighed, and I could picture him in whatever home Hed built with his new wife, irritated at being dragged into old problems. Maybe if you'd taught him better boundaries when he was younger, this wouldn't be happening. You always coddled him, did everything for him. This is what happens when you don't prepare kids for the real world. He was blaming me, twisting it so that Brandon's crimes were actually my parenting failures. I tried to argue. You abandoned us when he was 10. You paid the bare minimum in child support and visited twice a year. Where were you when I was raising him alone? Gerald's voice went cold. I offered to have him visit more. You were the one who made it difficult, who kept him from me because you were bitter about the divorce. Maybe if Hed had a father figure, he wouldn't be acting out now. Acting out. Like this was teenage rebellion and not adult felony. He stole $12,000 and committed fraud. That's not acting out. Gerald was done with the conversation. I could hear it in his voice. I moved on from that life, Lorraine. You should too. Stop calling me about things I can't fix. He hung up. I sat there holding my phone, staring at the disconnected call, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt. Then, my phone started ringing. Brandon's Aunt Cheryl, Gerald's sister, who I'd always gotten along with. Maybe she'd heard about the situation and was calling to offer support. I answered hopefully. How could you? Cheryl's voice was harsh. How could you try to kick Brandon out over a misunderstanding? My hope died. What did he tell you? Brandon had clearly been making calls, spinning his version to the family. According to Cheryl, I'd flown into a rage over nothing, threatened to throw Brandon out on the street, and was being vindictive and cruel. Hez your son, Lorraine. Family takes care of family. What would your mother think? That last sentence hit like a physical blow. My mother, Wood warned me not to lose myself in motherhood, weaponized against me to keep me trapped. The calls and texts kept coming over the next few days. Cousin Dennis, who I'd helped move 3 years ago, texted that I was being selfish. Aunt Shirley, Gerald's mother who was 82 years old, called crying about how I was tearing the family apart. Each person had heard Brandon's version, where he was the victim and I was the unstable, cruel mother. No one asked for my side of the story. Patricia called, and I answered, hoping for support from the one person who'd seen the truth. Lorraine, I've been thinking. Maybe you're being too harsh. My stomach dropped. What? Patricia sounded uncertain, not like herself. Hez your only child. Do you really want to destroy your relationship with him over money? Money can be replaced, but you'll never get another son. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He stole from me, Patricia. He forged my signature twice. Has been lying and manipulating me for months. She was quiet for a moment. I know, but family is complicated. What if he never speaks to you again? What if you're old and sick someday, and you've pushed away the only child you have? You'll regret this. She was playing on my deepest fear, the terror that had kept me trapped for months, the fear of being alone, of ending up old and sick with no one to care about me, of having sacrificed everything for a child who hated me. You're scared. Patricia continued, her voice softer now, and I understand that. But being right isn't worth being alone. After we hung up, I sat in my bedroom and cried harder than I had since my mother's funeral. Even Patricia, who'd seen everything, who'd been angry on my behalf, had backed down. The pressure to forgive, to accept, to keep being the endless well of maternal sacrifice was coming from every direction. Then the social media attack started. Amber posted on Facebook, one of those vague posts designed to get attention. It's so sad when parents use money as a weapon to control their children. Some people should never have kids. She didn't mention me by name, but she didn't have to. We had dozens of mutual friends from church, from Brandon's school years, from the neighborhood. The comments poured in. Parents who charge rent are toxic. My mom would never do that to me. So sorry you're dealing with this. Praying for you during this difficult time with difficult people. I watched the notifications roll in, each one a small knife. My book club friends saw it. Women from church saw it. The neighbors Eid lived next to for 22 years saw it and started treating me differently. Margaret from next door stopped by with a casserole. The kind you bring when someone's sick or grieving. I heard you're having a hard time, dear. Brandon mentioned you've been forgetful lately. Another neighbor, Tom, who lived across the street, caught me getting my mail and asked if Brandon was moving out soon. He said you're forcing him to leave? That seems harsh, Lorraine. Hess such a good boy. A good boy. A good boy who was systematically destroying my reputation while stealing my money. The isolation was crushing. My community, my church, my own family, all of them believed Brandon's version of events. He'd become the villain in my own life story. And there was no way to defend myself without looking exactly like what Head painted me to be. A bitter, unstable woman, having some kind of breakdown. The financial pressure was mounting too. My bank account was still drained. The mortgage payment was due again in 2 weeks, and I had no way to make it. The credit cards were maxed out from Brandon's spending, with minimum payments I couldn't afford. I'd talked to a lawyer who said yes, I could press charges for fraud, but it would cost money I didn't have for a prosecution that might not go anywhere because proving intent in family theft cases was difficult. I felt trapped in my own house, suffocated by debt and lies, and a son who'd turned my own love against me. Late one night, unable to sleep, I sat in the living room in the dark, looking at photo albums, pictures of Brandon as a baby, as a toddler taking his first steps, as a little boy holding up his first soccer trophy. In every photo, I could see myself in the background or behind the camera, always there, always present, always devoted. I traced my finger over a picture of him at 8 years old, grinning with missing front teeth, his arms around my neck. Where had that child gone? When had he stopped being the boy who made me Mother's Day cards and became the man who called me pathetic behind my back? I closed the album and sat in the silence. That's when I made my decision. The one that had been building like pressure behind a dam for months. I couldn't change Brandon. I couldn't make my family see the truth. I couldn't undo the damage or get back the money or repair what had been broken. But I could save myself. For the first time in my adult life, I could choose me. The doorbell rang at 7 the next morning, startling me awake on the couch where I'd eventually fallen asleep. I opened the door to find Marcus standing there with coffee and a determined expression. Aunt Lorraine, we need to talk. Can I come in? I let him in, grateful that Brandon and Amber were still asleep upstairs. Marcus set the coffee on the table and sat across from me. I heard what my mom said to you. She told me last night. And I told her she was wrong. Relief flooded through me so intense, I almost started crying again. She means well, but she's not seeing this clearly. You're not being harsh. If anything, you've been way too lenient. Marcus told me about his own experience 2 years ago with a girlfriend named Jennifer. She'd been sweet at first, then slowly started asking for money. Small amounts that grew larger. She'd moved into his apartment without officially moving in, staying over every night but never contributing. His parents had sat him down and shown him what was happening, helped him see that he was being used. It took me 3 months to accept it, and I was angry at my parents for pointing it out. But they were right. Jennifer was using me. And Brandon is using you. Aunt Lorraine, the difference is you're his mother, so the guilt runs deeper and the manipulation is more effective. Having someone finally validate what I'd been experiencing felt like being able to breathe after nearly drowning. Marcus pulled out his laptop. I'm an accountant. Let me look at your finances, and let's figure out your actual situation. I showed him everything. no longer ashamed or trying to hide how bad it had gotten. He went through my bank statements, mortgage documents, credit card bills, asking questions and making notes. After an hour, he sat back with a serious expression. Okay, here is the reality. Your house is worth approximately $450,000 based on recent comps in your neighborhood. You owe about $180,000 on the mortgage. If you sold, after realtor commissions and closing costs, you'd walk away with around $250,000, maybe more. I stared at him. Sell the house. The words felt foreign. This house was where I'd raised Brandon, where I'd lived for over 20 years. It was my home. Marcus leaned forward. Aunt Lorraine, when do you get to live? You've given 24 years of your life entirely to Brandon. You worked yourself to exhaustion, gave up every dream, sacrificed everything. When is it your turn? His words cracked something open inside me. But where would I go? What would I do? Marcus smiled. Anywhere you want. Didn't you always say you wanted to open a flower shop? Didn't you talk about visiting Montana? I had said those things, years ago, dreams I'd shared before they seemed impossible. Your sister Constance lives in Billings, right? What if you started over there? The idea seemed insane and terrifying, and somehow thrillingly possible. We spent the rest of the morning making a plan. First, I'd open a new bank account at a completely different bank, one Brandon had no access to or knowledge of. I'd reroute my paychecks there immediately. Second, Marcus would help me file a police report for the fraud, establishing a paper trail even if I didn't press charges. Third, I'd meet with a real estate agent, quietly, to discuss listing the house. Fourth, I'd document everything, the messes, the bills, the texts, anything that showed the pattern of abuse. Fifth, I'd prepare an exit strategy, figure out where I'd go and how I'd get there. Don't tell anyone, Marcus warned. Not my mom. Not your sister yet. Nobody. If Brandon gets wind of this before you're ready, hell, find a way to sabotage it. That afternoon, while Brandon was at work, I opened the new account at a credit union across town. I felt like a spy, like I was doing something wrong, even though I was just protecting my own money. I filled out the forms to have my paychecks deposited there instead of the old account. I withdrew what little cash was left from the old account and left it with just $500. Enough that Brandon wouldn't notice immediately, but not enough for him to drain. Everything else, every penny I earned from this point forward, would go to the new account he couldn't touch. Then something happened that almost made me give up the whole plan. I came home to find Brandon in the kitchen making tea, and had bought flowers, daisies, my favorite, in a simple vase on the counter. Mom, I'm sorry. He looked like my son again, the boy I'd raised, with genuine regret in his eyes. He made me tea the way I liked it and sat with me at the table. I don't want to fight anymore. I know I've been a jerk and I haven't been helping around the house like I should. That's going to change. We talked for an hour. Really talked. And it felt like maybe, possibly, we could fix this. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Marcus was wrong and this was just a rough patch. After Brandon went upstairs, his phone buzzed on the counter. Had left it behind. The screen lit up with a text from Amber. I didn't mean to look, wasn't trying to snoop, but the words were right there, unavoidable. Is she falling for it? I stared at that screen, feeling my brief hope crack and shatter. I scrolled up slightly, just enough to see Brandon's previous message. Yeah, doing the nice son act. She's buying it. Getting her flowers was genius. Another text from him to Amber from earlier that day. Need her to calm down until the car payments start. Can't afford both rent and the BMW. One more, this one from yesterday. Can't believe how easy she is to manipulate. Tears and apologies, and she forgets everything. My hands shook as I took a photo of the screen with my own phone, making sure to capture the messages clearly. When Brandon came back downstairs, I said nothing. I accepted his apology, smiled, acted normal. He thought had won. He hugged me before bed, and I hugged him back, and he had no idea that everything had changed. After he left for his room, I called Marcus. I'm ready. Let's do this. All of it. Marcus' voice was proud. You're sure? I looked around the kitchen. At the house I'd worked myself to death to keep. At the home that had become a prison. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The first week was preparation in silence. I opened the new bank account and rerouted my paychecks. I met with Marcus at a coffee shop, and we drove together to the police station, where I filed a report for financial fraud. The officer was sympathetic, a woman in her 40s who said she'd seen this situation before. It happens more often than people think. Adult children exploiting their parents. You're doing the right thing documenting this. She gave me a case number and explained that while prosecution was my choice, having the police report created legal protection if Brandon tried to claim later that I'd given him permission. I left with paperwork that felt both damning and liberating. Marcus had recommended a real estate agent named Donna, a woman in her 60s who specialized in quick sales. We met at a restaurant halfway across town where I was certain I wouldn't run into Brandon. Donna listened to my situation without judgment, then got down to business. Houses in your neighborhood are selling fast. If we price it right, we could have it under contract in 2 weeks. She suggested listing it for $440,000, slightly under market value to generate immediate interest. The key is getting a cash buyer who wants a fast close, 30 to 45 days, and you're free. Free. The word echoed in my head. We scheduled the listing for the following Tuesday, giving me time to prepare. I started moving things when Brandon was at work. Small things he wouldn't notice. Photo albums, my mother's jewelry, important documents, my favorite books. I rented a small storage unit on the other side of town and made trips during my lunch breaks, slowly extracting my life from the house. I researched apartments in Billings, Montana, and found a perfect one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, affordable with mountain views. I put down a deposit using money from my new account. I called the corporate office of the dental practice where I worked and explained I needed to transfer to their Montana location. They were accommodating, said they'd be happy to have me start there in 2 months. Everything was falling into place with a speed that felt both terrifying and meant to be. The house was listed on a Tuesday morning. A professional photographer came while Brandon was at work, and I spent the day before staging it perfectly, removing family photos and personal items like Donna instructed. The listing went live at noon, and by 3 p.m. we had 5 showing requests for that weekend. I told Brandon I was visiting Patricia for the weekend, spending Saturday and Sunday away. He barely looked up from his video game. Cool, have fun. He didn't ask why, didn't offer to come, didn't question the sudden trip. I actually stayed at a hotel 20 minutes away, paid for with my new account, and spent the weekend anxiously checking my phone for updates from Donna. Saturday's open house had 11 groups view the property. Donna called me that evening sounding excited. 3 serious buyers, all pre-approved for financing. One couple wants to bring their parents for a second showing tomorrow. Sunday afternoon, while I sat in my hotel room eating takeout and trying not to think about what I was doing, my phone rang. Lorraine, we have an offer. $440,000, all cash, 30-day close. The buyers were relocating from California for the husband's job, wanted to be settled before their kids started at the local school in 6 weeks. They're willing to go to 45 days if you need more time, but they want an answer by Monday morning. I sat on the hotel bed, phone pressed to my ear, my whole body shaking. This was real. This was actually happening. I'll take it. Let's do 30 days. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in secret preparation. I moved more items to storage, things I wanted to keep but didn't need immediately. I boxed up my winter clothes, telling Brandon I was donating them when he noticed the boxes. Spring cleaning, I said breezily. And he shrugged and went back to his phone. I opened a P.O. box for mail so nothing about the house sale would come to the physical address. I researched moving companies and found one that would pack and transport my furniture to Montana on short notice. I transferred my medical records, updated my address with the Social Security office, tied up every loose end I could think of. At night I lay awake, feeling guilty and liberated in equal measure, wondering if I was doing the right thing, knowing that I had no choice. 3 weeks before closing, Amber essentially moved in completely. Whatever pretense she'd maintained about having her own place vanished. Her clothes filled half the closet in Brandon's room. Her makeup took over the bathroom counter. Her shoes scattered through the hallway. They treated me like a servant, leaving dishes everywhere, demanding specific meals, complaining when I didn't buy the expensive coffee Amber liked. One evening I served spaghetti with marinara sauce, a simple meal because I'd worked a double shift and was exhausted. Amber looked at her plate with distaste. This is so plain. Don't you have any cooking skills? My mom makes restaurant-quality meals every night. Brandon laughed and high-fived her, both of them united in their contempt for my efforts. I just smiled and counted silently in my head. 19 more days. The final betrayal came 2 weeks before closing when I found papers Brandon had left on the dining room table. He was usually so careful, but had been drinking with Amber the night before and had gotten careless. It was a loan application for a $50,000 home equity line of credit against my house. My signature was on it, except it wasn't my signature. Had forged it again. More carefully this time. And the application was pending approval at a different bank than my usual one. If it went through, He'd have access to $50,000 more secured against my home. Debt that would transfer to whoever bought the house or that I'd be responsible for. This was his plan. To drain me completely. To take everything and leave me with nothing. I took photos of everything, added it to the folder of evidence I was building, and felt the last remnant of guilt evaporate. I'd been worried about hurting him, about damaging our relationship, about being the bad guy. But as I looked at his forged signature on documents meant to steal my home equity, I realized something. You can't damage a relationship that doesn't exist. Brandon didn't see me as his mother. He saw me as a resource to be exploited. And when I stopped being useful, he'd discard me without a second thought. The only question left was whether I'd let that happen or whether I'd save myself. 2 weeks before the close date, I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to give official notice. Saturday morning, I came downstairs to find Brandon and Amber at the kitchen table eating breakfast. I'd made pancakes and bacon they'd demanded the night before. "We need to talk," I said. Brandon groaned. "Mom, seriously, we have brunch plans with Amber's parents in an hour." Plans I hadn't been invited to, naturally. "Cancel them. This is important." Something in my voice made Brandon actually put down his phone and look at me. Amber sighed dramatically but stayed seated. I walked to the table and slid papers across the surface. Official documents with legal letterhead. "I've sold the house." Silence. Complete, total silence. Brandon stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "What?" His voice came out confused, disbelieving. "I sold the house. We close in 14 days. Amber grabbed the papers, scanning them quickly. "You can't do that." Her voice was shrill, panicked. "Actually, I can. It's my house, in my name only. And I've sold it to a lovely family from California for $440,000. Brandon finally processed what I was saying. He grabbed the contract, saw the signatures, the close date, the sale price. His face went white, then red, cycling through emotions like a slot machine. "Where am I supposed to go?" His voice cracked on the last word. I looked at him calmly. "That's not my concern anymore." Amber jumped to her feet. "You're insane. You can't just leave him homeless." I turned to her, this girl who'd helped orchestrate my financial destruction while freeloading in my home for weeks. Has 24 years old with a college degree and a full-time job making $45,000 a year. He can rent an apartment like every other adult. Brandon found his voice, anger replacing shock. "I can't afford rent. Do you know how expensive apartments are?" The irony was lost on him. "You can afford a BMW with a $500 monthly payment. You can afford designer clothes and weekend trips to Vegas and dinner at restaurants that cost $200. You just can't afford rent because you've never had to, because I've been subsidizing your lifestyle while you stole from me." I pulled out my folder, the one I'd been building for weeks. Bank statements showing his theft. Credit card bills with his charges. Screenshots of text messages coordinating with Amber. The forged loan application from 2 weeks ago. The earlier forged deed transfer from last year. "Want to talk about what you can afford? Or should we discuss the $12,000 you stole? Or the $50,000 you tried to steal with this fraudulent loan application?" Brandon's face went pale. He hadn't realized I knew about the latest forgery. "You've been planning this." His voice was barely above a whisper. "You've been spying on me. Documenting everything." I shook my head. "I've been protecting myself." "There's a difference." Brandon tried intimidation next, standing up to his full height, using his physical size to loom over me. "I'll sue you. I'll fight this sale. I'll tell everyone what you're doing." I stayed seated, stayed calm. Sue me for what? It's my house. And please, do tell everyone. I have police reports, witness statements, and documentation of everything you've done. Want to compare stories in court?" His bluster deflated. Amber tried tears next. "How can you do this to him? Hez your son. Don't you love him?" That question hung in the air. Did I love him? Yes. Somewhere buried under the hurt and betrayal, I still loved the child had been. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. I love myself more than I love being used. Brandon switched tactics, collapsing back into his chair with tears in his eyes. "Mom, please. I'm sorry. I know I messed up, but it'll change, I promise. Just give me another chance." The performance was good, practiced, the same one that had worked so many times before. I felt the old instinct to comfort him, to smooth this over, to make everything okay. Then I remembered the text I'd seen. "Can't believe how easy she is to manipulate." I remembered Amber's voice on speakerphone, both of them laughing about robbing me. I remembered his words to his girlfriend. "I'm tired of seeing my mom's face." I stood up and looked at my son. "Too late. I don't believe you anymore." I explained the timeline. 14 days until close. They had 2 weeks to find an apartment, pack their belongings, and vacate the property. It'd be staying at a hotel until the closing to avoid any unpleasantness. Brandon's voice turned desperate. "Where are you going after this?" I smiled but didn't answer. "That's not your concern." I wasn't telling him about Montana, about my new job, about the fresh start waiting for me. He didn't get to know that information. Didn't get to follow me, or find me, or continue this cycle. "You're really just going to leave? Just like that?" Amber's voice was disbelieving. "Yes," I said simply. "Just like that." I picked up my purse, walked out of the kitchen, and left them sitting there in shock at the table where I'd served them countless meals they never thanked me for. The next 2 weeks were the longest and shortest of my life. I checked into an extended stay hotel and paid for 14 days, using a small loan Marcus had offered to float me until the house proceeds came through. Brandon called repeatedly. I sent every call to voicemail. The messages started angry, threatening, full of accusations and ultimatums. Then they turned pleading, apologetic, promising change if I'd just come back and stop this insanity. Then they turned manipulative, reminding me of his childhood, of how I'd promised to always be there for him, weaponizing my own maternal love. I didn't respond to any of them. Amber texted too, her messages swinging between rage and manipulation. She tried threats, saying they'd trash the house before they left. Then bribes, saying Brandon would pay me back every penny if I'd just stopped the sale. Then guilt, asking how I could sleep at night knowing I was ruining their future. I blocked her number. Patricia called, her voice frantic. "Have you lost your mind?" Brandon called me crying, saying you're selling the house out from under him. I took a deep breath. Did he tell you he stole $12,000 from me? Did he mention the forged loan application or the credit card fraud? Silence on the other end. He said that was a misunderstanding. I almost laughed. "There's no misunderstanding, Patricia. I have police reports and bank statements. Your son Marcus helped me document everything." More silence. "You're really doing this?" Her voice sounded sad, disappointed. "Yes, I really am." We hung up with things unresolved between us, and that hurt, but not as much as I'd expected. Tom called me later that day, Patricia's husband, and his call surprised me. "I'm proud of you," he said gruffly. "Patricia doesn't understand yet, but she will eventually. You're doing the right thing." Brandon needed to face consequences years ago. His support meant more than I could express. Marcus checked on me every day, bringing me coffee or lunch, making sure I wasn't backing down. Donna, the real estate agent, became an unexpected friend, sharing stories of other women she'd helped escape bad situations through strategic house sales. "You're braver than you know," she told me over coffee 3 days before closing. My book club friends, the ones who knew the real story, formed a small but fierce support system, sending encouraging texts and reminding me that choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. Closing day arrived 42 days after the listing, exactly as contracted. I met Brandon at the house for the final walkthrough, before handing over keys. He was living there alone now because Amber's parents, when they'd learned she'd been living rent-free in someone else's house, had refused to let her move in with Brandon, and had demanded she come home. Brandon had found a cheap apartment with 2 roommates, sharing a space in a building with thin walls and no air conditioning, and he was bitter about every aspect of it. The house looked terrible. There were holes in the walls where Head punched them in anger, stains on the carpet from spilled drinks or food. The fridge Head left open overnight in what I suspected was spite, ruining hundreds of dollars of food. I documented everything with photos for the security deposit I knew Head tried to fight me over. Brandon stood in the living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes, looking diminished somehow. Head sold the BMW because he couldn't make the payments without my money subsidizing his life. He was taking the bus to work now, facing the reality of his actual financial situation for the first time in years. "When will I see you again?" His voice was small, younger than his 24 years. I looked at him and felt sadness but not guilt. "I don't know. Maybe when you've grown up." He scoffed. "I am grown up." I shook my head. "No. You're not. But maybe you will be someday. I hope you will be." I handed him an envelope, a letter I'd written over several nights at the hotel. "Read this later." He took it, confused, uncertain. I took one last look around the house where I'd raised my son, where I'd spent 22 years of my life. And then I walked out the door without looking back. The letter explained everything I couldn't say to his face. How much I'd loved him. How hard I'd tried to be enough. To give him enough. To sacrifice enough. How his cruelty had broken my heart in ways I was still discovering. How his actions, as devastating as they were, had also freed me. I wasn't angry anymore, I wrote. I was just sad. Sad for the relationship we'd lost. Sad for the son I'd thought I had versus the man He'd actually become. But I also told him I hoped He'd learn from this, hoped He'd grow, hoped someday He'd understand that enabling isn't love and sacrifice isn't selfless if it destroys the person doing it. I ended the letter with honesty I'd never managed in person. "I'll always be your mother, but I have to be myself first. Maybe someday you'll understand why." The closing happened at 2 p.m. at a lawyer's office downtown. I signed papers until my hand cramped, watched the title transfer to the new owners, and received a check for $263,000 after all debts, commissions, and closing costs were paid. It was more money than I'd ever seen in one place, representing 22 years of mortgage payments, of equity built slowly through exhausting work. I deposited it immediately in my new account, the one Brandon would never touch, and felt something that might have been hope. My car was already packed with everything I needed immediately. The moving truck would pick up my furniture from storage next week and transport it to Montana. My new apartment was ready. My new job started in 3 weeks, and my sister Constance was waiting to help me settle in. As I drove away from the lawyer's office, away from the town I'd lived in for decades, my phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. "I read your letter." I looked at it, sitting at a red light, and put the phone in my purse without responding. Maybe later I'd reply, maybe not. Right now, that wasn't what mattered. As I merged onto the interstate heading north and west toward Montana, toward mountains I'd never seen and a life I'd never imagined, I thought about my mother's words. "Don't lose yourself in motherhood." I'd lost myself for 24 years, poured every ounce of who I was into being Brandon's mother until there was nothing left of Lorraine. But I'd found myself again, scraped together from the wreckage of my son's betrayal. At 54 years old, I was starting over with nothing but a car full of clothes, a bank account with my future in it, and the knowledge that I'd finally chosen myself. Was it worth it? I didn't know yet. The grief of losing my son, or at least losing the illusion of who I'd thought he was, sat heavy in my chest. But for the first time in years, decades maybe, I felt something else too. Freedom. Not freedom from responsibility or obligation, but freedom to discover who Lorraine was when she wasn't defined entirely by motherhood. Freedom to make choices for myself, to spend my money on my own dreams, to live in a space that was mine without someone draining me dry. As I crossed the state line into Colorado, the first leg of my journey to Montana, I saw mountains rising in the distance and felt tears on my face. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were relief and terror, and something that felt surprisingly like joy. The most loving thing I'd ever done for my son wasn't working 3 jobs to pay for his college or sacrificing every dream to give him opportunities. It was walking away. letting him face the consequences of his choices, letting him stand or fall on his own, refusing to enable his cruelty any longer. Maybe he'd learn from this. Maybe he'd grow into the man he'd always hoped he'd become. Maybe he'd stay exactly as he was, entitled and selfish until life taught him the hard lessons it'd protected him from. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. I'd given 24 years. Now, finally, it was my turn to live. So if you're watching this, and you're in a situation where someone you love is using your love against you, where sacrifice has become enabling and devotion has become destruction, I want you to hear this. You're not selfish for choosing yourself. You're not a bad parent or a bad person for setting boundaries or walking away. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face their own consequences while you save yourself. That's not cruelty. That's survival. And maybe, just maybe, it's the best lesson you could ever teach them. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between someone you love and your own well-being? How did you find the strength to choose yourself? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this story resonated with you, if it touched something in your own experience or reminded you that you're not alone, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, because every week I share stories of survival, resilience, and the courage it takes to start over. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's struggling with the weight of toxic family dynamics or one-sided sacrifice. Sometimes just knowing that someone else has walked this path and survived makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, for being here, for witnessing this chapter of my life. I hope wherever you are, whatever you're facing, you find the courage to choose yourself too. May you find your own freedom, your own mountains, your own fresh start. Until next time, take care of yourselves.